Hi, I'm David Jackson with Seattle Connected, the show that connects you with entrepreneurs, business people, movers and shakers in our community before they become household names, which we know they soon will be. I normally would start off with a very extravagant intro and we would joke and laugh and have a good time, but today we're going to take a different approach. Today's show is a serious one, but it is a good one. It's a conversation that we need to have in our community. So I hope that you learned something, and what you learned today might be able to help somebody else with their life. So with that said, I would like to welcome my guest, Yordanos, from our sister's house.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show. I really appreciate it. I was really excited about this. So thank you so much. So I'll let you start off. Can you just tell us what is our sister's house?
Our Sister's House is a nonprofit in Tacoma. So it was founded in 1995 by our current executive director, Kelly, her mother, and her mother's sister-in-law. And they're Betty and Sharon. And basically, they opened up Our Sister's House in order to help teenage girls who were navigating the juvenile system. And they quickly noticed that a lot of those girls were finding themselves in situations where they would be like experiencing domestic violence or sexual violence or a combination of both. And so they realized that maybe they like needed to really focus on that aspect. There became like a big need for women of color that needed resources specifically for domestic violence and sexual violence. And so Our Sister's House was a home for these teenage girls. And then it kind of turned into just this nonprofit that offers resources for the community and specifically culturally specific resources for Black and African American survivors of domestic violence.
Wow, that's amazing. That's beautiful. How did you get involved?
So I don't work directly with clients in the same way that a lot of the people on the team do. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk a little bit about myself, but I also wanted to highlight so kind of like the things that the other team members do just because it's really important.
Yeah.
But what I do is I'm the project outreach coordinator. I do a lot of public facing stuff that kind of promotes Our Sister's House and just lets the community know that we're here and we're there for them. And a big thing we also do is like engage the community in these serious conversations. And in doing that, we're able to reach folks who might not necessarily use Our Sister's House for our services, but through our education, especially with partnering with other nonprofits and organizations in Tacoma and Washington State as a whole, we're able to kind of start conversations that might not have happened and also offer that education in order to hopefully prevent some kind of violence in the future in the community, in people's lives. And so we do this through like community forum events, education events. We go into the schools. And then as for some of my coworkers, I was asking them about how they ended up at Our Sister's House. And one of them was telling me that their experience with homelessness really made them kind of realize like how left behind people can get when they're just in situations that no one really wants to help them out with. So because of their homelessness, they were denied resources over and over again. And so they were really pushed to work in an area where they would be able to help people who are really vulnerable and might not be able to get the resources they need just because of the situation that they're in. And then another person on our team, she's an advocate, and she crossed paths with Kelly, our executive director, during the pandemic and realized that they had a lot of things in common. And at the time, when the pandemic had started, Our Sister's House started to implement like services in order to help our clients because of, financial stuff and everything.
Right.
And so that's how they met. And then also she's a domestic violence survivor. So with all that combined, she really valued the mission of Our Sister's House. She's also a Black person as well, and that's really important. Our team is super diverse, not only in like our race and ethnicity, but also like our age range, and we just all offer unique perspectives to the team that help all of our clients, no matter their background. But the most important thing I would say, and I think that this is also something that we really pride ourselves in, is that pretty much like everyone on the team, in order to be at our sister's house, like you need to be culturally competent. And if you're not, like that only creates more harm for survivors. So that's something that our sister's house really prides ourselves in. And we are the only nonprofit organization in Washington state that offers culturally specific services for Black and African American
Mm.
survivors.
Man, that's awesome. You would think that there would be more, around in the state of Washington as diverse as it's becoming, but I'm glad that we have our sister's house, and thank you. And as far as education goes, I know you're going to educate me today. I was going to ask you, in your own opinion, what would you say is a big misconception that people have about those who are victims of domestic violence?
Yeah, I would say the biggest misconception, there are quite a few, but I'll say the
Hmm.
biggest one is probably like if it was really that bad, they would have left. Like they would have left their abusive
Mm.
partner. Um, and is it okay if I go into like some
Oh,
other
absolutely.
misconceptions that kind of go into that?
Yeah.
Another thing is like if a couple has children or maybe like co-parenting, but not necessarily like really in a relationship together, but there is that violence, and the victim decides to attempt to leave or finally leaves, and survives. Sometimes they're blamed, and people will say to them, "Oh, well, you have children. You should have stayed together, like for the sake of the children," as if that is a valid excuse to, stay in a harmful environment that might even eventually lead to your children being hurt as well.
Right.
Um, Another thing, which I think this might be a little bit higher on the spectrum, but basically the victim did something to their abuser in order to be abused. And obviously, abuse is not okay in under any circumstances. So, yeah, I feel like those three are ones that I hear the most. But the number one thing is if it was really that bad, they would have left. And
Right.
it takes women several times to leave. I think it's like 6 to 7 times to finally leave their abusive partner. I don't actually, I'm not necessarily sure if it's just women. I haven't really checked in on that, but
Hmm.
it takes people multiple times before they're finally able to leave their abuser. And that's because it's just dangerous.
Yeah.
And like that number also just marks like those who survive the violence.
Right. Is there a sense of, I guess, well, you touched on fear, but do you find that a lot of the victims feel that they're the blame? Like they did something to deserve it, or if they would have did something differently, it wouldn't have happened? Because I can see how a lot of victims might stay out of fear or feeling that if they change certain things that maybe things will get better.
For sure. Yeah. Shame, fear, guilt, all of that. That's what the abuser wants.
Mm.
That's like part of the goal of the abuser. So like it's kind of hard to really just like measure how often survivors of domestic violence blame themselves or feel like they deserve the abuse. But because part of the goal of an abuser is making sure that their victim feels like they're responsible for their situation,
Right.
um, when that does happen, it's usually because they've internalized that shame. They've internalized what they're hearing over and over again about the fact that X, Y, and Z is the reason why they're being abused. X, Y, and Z is the reason why they deserve to be hurt. And so, like, the big part of domestic violence is power and control. The abuser wants power and control over their victim. And that's why things like manipulation and gaslighting, et cetera, all of that happens. And that can also look like psychologically convincing a survivor that they aren't a victim, but complicit in their own abuse. Um, and so internalizing all of that, it doesn't really help when maybe members of your community, of your family, or friend groups also are vocal about the fact that um, you could be doing something to get yourself out of the situation. So what do we call
Right.
that? Victim blaming.
Right.
And that's never That's never helpful. And that also comes out of like preconceived notions about domestic violence and
Yeah.
survivors of domestic violence and what abuse looks like and what an abuser can look like. So, yeah, that kind of ties in about the misconceptions we were talking about before. But yeah, definitely.
Now, do you feel like there's sometimes a generational impact from domestic violence, like something that children might see today
Mm.
and maybe influences their decisions later on if they become an abuser or a person who is abused themselves? Because a lot of times I know we might mirror what we see growing up in our own households, and well, my mom did it like this, or my dad did it like this, or that's just how life is there usually, or do you know of a lot of cases where people who are victims might have experienced that themselves when they were children?
Yeah, so the term I believe is like intergenerational trauma, and then
Okay.
in the case of like domestic violence, it could be intergenerational abuse.
Hmm.
I don't think there's like a specific term, but I think a lot of us, especially those that come from marginalized communities, we know the term intergenerational trauma. We've seen in our own families and our own communities. But yeah, so. I actually found a study from researchers at Sam Houston State University, College of Criminal Justice, and Colorado State University. And they found that growing up in a home with domestic violence, so experiencing or witnessing it, significantly increased the chances of living with domestic violence later in life.
Hmm.
So, what they found was that 80% of their study participants who were involved with domestic violence had adult children who also ended up becoming involved with a domestic violence incident.
Wow.
Um,
You say 80%?
and yeah, 80%. And like, so like domestic violence, surviving domestic violence is an accomplishment, but it leaves you with like a lifelong, just like chains of events that are linked to the trauma of witnessing or experiencing domestic violence that can become generational.
Right.
Um, and so, something that our sister's house actually does is we offer resources for children and teenagers who have experienced domestic violence, whether like directly towards them or they saw like a parent experience domestic violence. And the reason that we do that is because of like that 80% number that I just told you.
Right.
Like, that's that's really, really high. Like, it's nothing like 50% or maybe like 30%. It's 80% is the majority
Yeah. Right.
of those folks. Excuse me, I'm like laughing a little bit.
No, it's just amazing that it's
Yeah.
just yeah. No,
Um,
I totally get that. And you said you offer services for teens as well. What type of services do you guys provide?
so let me quickly, sorry, is it okay if I start that over?
Yeah, no problem.
I have all of our programming
Yeah,
here. I
take
just
your
need to
time.
find it in my notes.
Yeah, take your time. No problem.
Okay. All right, I'm ready to start whenever now.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. So, some of the things that we do at our sister's house is we offer obviously domestic violence advocacy to assist victims and survivors of domestic violence. We also offer crime victim advocacy for victims of crime.
Hmm.
And then we have a program called Healthy Relationships, which is an after school program for youth that teaches them how to have healthy relationships with themselves and their loved ones, as well as the people they interact with on a daily basis. And then we also have Building New Bridges, which is an evidence-based program that gives at-risk youth and their families the tools that they need to build relationships and meet their goals. And as for support groups, we have a few of those. Our main one for survivors of domestic violence is Sister Seeking Change, and it is a culturally specific support group for African American and Black survivors. But of course, everyone is welcome. We do not turn anyone away. It's just like really important for us to
Mm-hmm.
emphasize that we have that culturally specific service. Survivors basically just meet together in a safe space and share their stories and also learn from each other, as well as our facilitator and advocate, who is also a survivor herself and a Black woman. And we also have Stepping Stones, which is a support group for families with children ages 6 to 11. So, this is like one of the programs that I was talking about. The goal of Stepping Stones is to help kids who have been exposed to domestic violence, basically by teaching parents specifically about coping strategies and just trying to decrease the impact of post-violent stress overall so that that doesn't come up in the future and create some trauma that is rooted in witnessing or experiencing that domestic violence.
Okay.
And then our last support group is New Directions, which is for families with teens ages 12 to 18. And this is for folks who have experienced teen initiated domestic violence, which is something I don't think I really have heard folks who work in this sector really like specifically hone in on, unless their whole organization just like focuses on youth and teenagers. But this support group really focuses on things like anger management, conflict resolution, and effective communication. And so the goal of all of this is to just really prevent a cycle of violence that might happen if all of these things weren't in place.
Mm. Now, do you offer help for, I think you mentioned earlier about victims of sexual assault? Is that in the same groups that you have for the victims of domestic violence?
So we don't directly help with that, but we have partners that do. So what we will do is our advocates will make sure to connect a survivor that they're working with one of our partners, or if they're not necessarily our partner, just another organization in the area, or somebody specifically close to them that can help them out. But our Sister's House just mainly focuses on domestic violence in our services, and then we do education on sexual violence, though, like in our community programs.
Okay. Yeah, that's important. Don't say just. You guys do so much, it's amazing. And I think that that's very important to have those type of groups with a diverse group of faces. It's hard sometimes when you're in a space where you feel like you're the only one, and seeing that there's others who might look like you, might be around your same age, it might make things a little bit easier for you to open up and be vulnerable. And I think that that's so cool that you guys are able to let people share their stories, and then others might be compelled to share their stories, and they feel comfortable. They feel like they're not being judged, which is really important. And that leads me to my next question. I was going to ask you, if I know somebody who is a victim of domestic violence and I'm sensing something's going on, like, what's the best way to approach them without shaming them or making them feel even worse or, embarrassed? Like, is there a certain way that I should approach them, or is there certain trigger words that I shouldn't use, or what would you recommend?
For sure. That's a really good question. I'm really glad you asked that, because I think a lot of people need to hear this, because like it's not talked about really. And even myself, I wasn't really fully educated on it until I joined the organization. But the number one thing that we tell folks who want to support survivors in their life is, or if they're still in a domestic violence situation, to just listen to them. Don't jump in and start asking all these questions. You don't know what will trigger them. You don't know what will be helpful, what might not be helpful. But when you're listening, you just have to be silent, just validate, and make sure you're paying attention. And I feel like there's this idea that oh, somebody's in a domestic violence situation. If I love them, if I want them to be safe, I should probably call the authorities.
Right.
But that's like a big no, especially when it comes to people of color, specifically Black people. Calling the police can become deadly. It can even result in the abuser retaliating and doing something that they might not have done if they didn't know that the police was called. And unfortunately, this is something that I feel like as a society, we're kind of trained to think, oh, in like emergency situations like this, like the police is the go-to. But this is why it's really important to listen, because when you're listening and you're taking in all the information that your friend or a loved one is telling you about their abuser, um, and you decide after all of that to call the police, you're just putting them in more danger, you know? And of course, if your friend, if your loved one is asking you to call the authorities, or if they're in a situation where they are prepared to advocate for themselves, or somebody, they have somebody that will advocate on behalf of them, um, like folks at our sister's house or like our legal advocate or something like that, then of course, do what you think is best based off what the survivor says, but also, kind of read the room, kind of make sure that what they're saying like sounds like a good idea. But yeah, kind of like going past that, just listen, be present for them, offer to be an emergency contact for something, or something that you could do is store a to-go bag for them. So a to-go bag is like basically just a small bag of essentials for the survivor. And if they have kids, for their kids, or even if they have pets, for their pets. And basically, this is a bag that if you store at your place, a survivor can just like dip from their place and go to your place and just be in a safe place with all of their important information on them. Because a big thing with domestic violence is if you don't have those important documents and whatnot, it can be really hard to get the resources you need. It can be really hard to find housing. It can be really hard to get a lot of things, unfortunately. And sometimes what abusers will do is they'll target those documents. They'll make sure you don't have access to that. So that would be really important as a friend, as a loved one, to do for somebody that is experiencing domestic violence. Another thing you can do is just offer your time. So visit organizations with them, do research on their behalf, just be a person that they know that they can trust, because you never know if something escalates, but they don't really trust you. What if they don't tell you that? But if you like really make yourself known that you're a person that they can trust, and you won't like go around and tell people their business, or communicate with their abuser or their people that their abuser might be friends with, stuff like that, just really solidify that relationship and just be present. That's all that I can really say. Something that we talked about on our podcast, Confabulation, I feel like a few years ago, was how you can support domestic violence survivors during like the holidays, or maybe not survivors, but folks that are still in a domestic violence situation. And the answer was the same: to just be present, offer your time, offer yourself as a person. If they need somebody to go with them to like a family function, go with them. If they want somebody to be there with them because their abuser has like invited them out with a group of people, but they won't know anybody else there, go with them if it's safe for them, and if like it won't cause any like suspicion or anything like that. So yeah, just those are a few things, but the main thing is just to be present and to listen. Don't make assumptions. Don't insert yourself prematurely in a way that might put them in danger. And just make sure you understand the implications of kind of doing your own thing and trying to take control of the situation. There are people who have the knowledge to do that, who can offer the resources to help that friend or loved one. And it might not be you, and it's okay, as long as you're just being a person for your loved one.
Right. And that's, I think listening is huge, and you want that person to feel like they can come to you, no matter what, and not feel a sense of being judged. So I think sometimes, some people might just need someone to listen and know that they're okay. They're in a safe space. This person's going to hear what I'm going through. And you want them to feel like you always have an open door and they can reach out to you. You don't want them to put up more of a wall than they did before and feel like, I have nobody to turn to. I'm in this, tough situation. I don't know what to do. So I think that is important, just to, like you said, listen and not be premature in, or pointing fingers or making assumptions or inserting yourself in. It's, all about them. It's not about ourselves per se. So that's really important. Now, do you have any stories where you've had victims who came to our sister's house and, they made it through a tough situation, and they actually came back like, hey, I really appreciate the support you guys have given me, or I'd like to refer one of my friends or family members to you guys? Do you ever hear back from some of the people who you guys have worked with?
Yeah, some of our advocates, they'll hear back from clients time to time and basically just like be updated about how their life is going. And they always are super grateful about all of the help that they got from our sister's house. I remember one time I was talking to one of the advocates, and she was telling me that she had seen someone that she helped a few years ago, like out when she was shopping or something, and she didn't even recognize her. Like the way that she just transformed over the years and which is a whole new different person. When they saw each other and finally exchanged words, like she was in shock about just how things have had
That's
gone.
awesome.
And
Still.
I'm sure I I didn't really ask folks about this just because again I don't really talk to clients personally, and but yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's
But
cool.
I definitely remember an advocate telling me that, and um I feel like I remember hearing about somebody who had come back to volunteer
Mm.
after they had received services from our sister's house. But yeah, there's a really tight knit relationship between our advocates and their clients, and it's really heartwarming to see, especially when it comes to Black and African American clients, knowing like the demographic of the state of Tacoma. It's not very diverse, it's not very Black, so it's really powerful to know that we're able to offer those culturally specific services, and on top of that, be able to see folks that statistically shouldn't have made it out of their situation in the best way or at all, to be able to see them years later and thriving.
I know you have some more statistics for us, probably written down.
Oh, I don't have
No.
any written
Oh,
down,
okay.
but I
Yeah.
just remember that there are statistics that support
Okay. Yeah.
that.
I'm still baffled on when you said about 80%.
Yeah,
That's like, oh my goodness.
it's a big
Way.
number.
Yeah, way too
Yeah.
high. So, wow, I think we've unpacked so much. Thank you so much. And if someone wants to get a hold of you, if they'd like to see more information about our sister's house, or they have questions, or if they're in a situation themselves and they need help, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so first and foremost, our website, oursistershouse.com, you can fill out the contact form there and you'll be connected with an advocate. You can also call us at 253-383-4275. And we also have a Facebook page that's just Our Sisters House. And our Instagram is our_sisters_house. And we also have a TikTok at Our Sisters House, but we don't use it as often. We're really active on Facebook and Instagram, though, if you really want to get information from us. And then, of course, directly contacting advocates in our office is the phone number and the website. And just for more education, we also have a podcast called Confabulation. And you can find that on all podcast platforms. And we also have a YouTube channel that basically just has the same thing as what you can find on the podcast platforms, but sometimes we have video content. And if that might not be enough for somebody, or if somebody that is experiencing domestic violence isn't in Pierce County or the state of Washington, the National Domestic Violence Hotline can be contacted at 1-800-799-7233. So that's a really important phone number to have as well. And our sister's house can be contacted pretty much every single day of the week, and we have emergency hours on the weekends as well.
Okay, cool. And you said you're located in Tacoma?
Yes, Tacoma,
Okay.
Washington.
All right, sounds good. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the people at home, or give any shout outs to any of your colleagues?
Well, of course, shout out to all of the team at Our Sisters House. I'm really proud of the organization that I'm a part of, and I'm sure that everyone else is as well. Thank you for having us. I hope that this reaches the right people, and I hope that us as a community are really invested in conversations surrounding domestic violence, because it is a serious issue, especially since the pandemic. There has been an increase in domestic violence. So do your research, do your homework, make sure that you understand what it means to be an ally, to be a supportive person to somebody who's experiencing domestic violence. And yeah, be there, be present, don't make assumptions. And yeah, love the ones around you and pay attention to what's going on because sometimes you really don't know.
Right. I like that. Thank you so much, Adonis, for all the information. Thank you for taking time out for just educating us and just letting people know that there is help out there if they are in a situation, as such. So thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you and your colleagues are doing. I know it at times probably seems like a lot, but trust me, we really appreciate it. We need it. And we thank you for your service to the community. And I thank you guys at home. Play this back if you need to get in touch with our sister's house, or you just want to play this for someone else who might be inspired by some of the information they received today. And I thank you guys. And like she said, be there for your loved ones. And like I always say, it's important to take care of others, but please make sure you take time to take care of yourself. Until next time, stay connected. Peace.